Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I want to thank Michel Danino for giving me an opportunity to come here and talk to you about Professor BB Lal's perspective on the Harappan civilization vis-a-vis the Vedic culture. When in 1920s, it was discovered that the antiquity of Harappan civilization dated back to 3rd millennium BCE, and with Max Muller earlier saying that the Aryans entered India in 1500 BCE, it was evident that the authors of Harappan civilization and Aryans were two different people. The net result being that the Harappan civilization was considered to be pre-Vedic and non-Vedic. While Professor Lal addressed most of these concerns in his papers and books, he felt very strongly about the impossibility of Aryan Invasion Theory and the consequent destruction of Harappan civilization by them. How could a civilization dated to 4th and 3rd millennium BC and which fizzled out by 1900 BC could be destroyed by incoming marauders in 1500 BC? Few issues that are relevant to the topic under discussion are as follows. Whether the so-called Aryans were invaders or immigrants, or were they indigenous? Max Muller had pronounced the dating of Rigvedic to be 1200 BC, which he later withdrew, saying that whether the Vedic hymns were composed in 1000 or 1500 or 2000 or 3000, no power on earth will ever determine. That being so, where did the Rigved fit into the chronology of India? Who were the authors of Harappan civilization? And finally, what is the relationship between the Harappan civilization and the Vedic people? In his book, The Rigvedic People, Invaders, Indigenous, Immigrants, or Indigenous, Evidence of Archaeology and Literature, Professor Lal discusses the above issues threadbare to arrive at the relationship of Harappan civilization and the Vedic people. He starts by challenging the Aryan invasion that destroyed the Indus civilization and which resulted in Indus people, supposedly the Dravidians, being thrown out to the southern India. Professor Lal begins by quoting Sir Mortimer Wheeler's report in 1946 excavations, in which Wheeler wrote, Aryan invasion on the land of 7 rivers, the Punjab and its environs, constantly assumes the form of onslaught upon the walled cities of the Aborigines. Sir Wheeler goes on to say, what destroyed this firmly settled civilization? Climatic, economic, political deterioration may have weakened it, but its ultimate extinction is more likely to have been completed by deliberate and large-scale destruction. It may be no mere chance, that at a late period of Mohenjo-daro, men, women, and children appear to have been massacred there. On circumstantial evidence, Indra stands accused. His relationship was Indra and Purandara, which I am skipping for the moment now. Professor Lal regards the statement on environment, circumstantial evidence, Indra stands accused as, quote, high watermark of Aryan Invasion Theory, which became, as it were, the gospel truth for decades to come until it was demonstrated to be hollow by subsequent writers, unquote. His own analysis of so-called massacre at Mohenjo-daro commences with the obvious. Where were the skeletons found? He begins by giving the layout of Mohenjo-daro. The site has 2 components, citadel in the lower town. He observes that all the skeletons, complete or fragmentary, came from the lower town and none from the citadel, which in itself raises a question. Lower town, he tells us, is subdivided into various sections. In them, the skeletons were scattered all over the site, and they belong to different horizons, namely intermediate, late, and even posterior to the abandonment of site. The entire evidence shows that if the massacre theory is to hold good, skeletons should have come from one and the same level, which would normally have been the latest. Other questions like skeletons bearing marks of injuries inflicted on them, either with javelin or sword or even arrows, should have been seen, but no such injury marks have been reported by any of the excavations, nor have any weapons of warfare been reported from any of the sites. The massacre would then appear to be far-fetched assumption. No wonder, he says, that George Dales very rightly dubbed it as a mythical massacre. Lal thus concludes that skeletons have nothing to do with any invasion or massacre. It is also pertinent to note that along with Dales, Colin Renfrew, Jim Schaffer, Diane Lixentine, and our own Michel Denino totally disagreed with such an invasion theory. It took quite a while to rule out AIT. While invasion was ruled out, or was being ruled out, Urmila Thapa came up with an alternative theory. She said in a book, 1891, if invasion is discarded, then the mechanism of migration and occasional contacts come into sharper focus. Migrations appear to have been of pastoral cattle breeders. Please note, pastoral cattle breeders, immigration, who are prominent in the Avesta and the Rigved. Unquote. Following her, R. S. Sharma asserted that the pastoralists who moved into the Indian borderland came from Bactria Margiana archaeological complex, or BMAC, which saw the genesis of the culture of Rigved. Professor Lal reviews this theory, and reviews is a very mild word that I'm using here. To begin with, Lal profiles the Bactria Margiana archaeological complex. As you know, it's the north of Afghanistan and Turkmenistan. He discusses the town planning, architectural remains, sculptural art, metal objects. He shows us the temple at Toglak in Margiana, citadel at Ganur, also at Margiana, stone figure of a lady from Bactria, chlorite and gold leaf representation of a feline with semi-precious stones from Bactria, silver ceremonial axe with parts covered with gold lamina. With such rich culture, he argues, can BMAC be called a product of pastoral cattle breeders? He then goes on to counter its excavator, Victor Saryanidhi's supportive arguments in BMAC being an Aryan product. Arguments being A, the motive on the seals, B, fire worship, C, Soma, D, horse sacrifice, Ashwamedh. While Professor Lal's discussions are elaborate and therefore cannot be discussed due to paucity of time, suffice it to say that the conclusions do not stand scrutiny to support Saryanidhi's version. At the end, he shows maps published by Saryanidhi himself, which says that the main motive, man, bird with hit animals, and animal and stake motives did not cross the Indus. There was yet another attempt at AIT in 1996 by Gregory Possehl, who asserted that the Vedic flora pertains to cold climate and therefore the Vedic people came from a cold climate and cannot be indigenous. Professor Lal responded to this in 2005 published book, The Homeland of Aryans, the Rigvedic Flora and Fauna, clearly describing each flora and fauna mentioned by Professor Purcell. A sample of his analysis is here when he's discussed two flora and two fauna cases. So he's been into that also. Some scholars still persisting with the DNA, which is being debated. How long will it go on? What will be the result? We don't know. Professor Lal's next question was, if Vedic people were neither invaders nor immigrants, were they indigenous? He starts with the evolution of civilization in the Sarasvati basin, now the Ghaggar basin. Where its first occupants, as we know today, started living in pit dwellings in the 5th millennium BCE. He commences with the mound in Bhirrana village on the left bank of Sarasvati. The first settlers over here lived in circular pits. Professor Lal then covers Kunal, also on the left bank of Sarasvati. The only difference being that the dwellers' pits showed post holes. He called this type of settlement as stage 1. He classifies stage 2 to mean when the dwellers emerge out of pits and begin settling on the land surface in mud brick houses. He discusses evolution of stage 2 in Bhirrana and Kunal, also adds Rakigadi and Dhalewan to the stage. Stage 3 is where the concept of wall is introduced around the periphery of the settlement, and stage 4 is the introduction of citadel in lower town, indicating a full-fledged urbanization. He concludes by stating that no cultural change had taken place during stages 1, that is the 5th millennium BC, to this 4th stage by the decay or till the decay of civilization about 1900, 2000 BC. He also quotes Hemphill, who had said that no biological continuum had taken place in the subcontinent between 4500 and 800 BCE. Having established a continuity of civilization since the 5th millennium BCE, he then proceeds on the discussions to civilization of Sarasvati basin, vis-a-vis the Rigved. The river is described in the Rigved as the best of the mothers, the best of the rivers, and best of the goddesses. It being an integral part of Rigved, Professor Lal elects to re-examine the dating of Rigved based on the river Sarasvati. According to the Rigved, there lived many peoples in the Sarasvati basin and many kings ruled over there. For example, the Rigved says that Sarasvati was a promoter of 5 peoples but does not specify their names. Other verse refers to a king named Chitra but mentions that there were other rulers as well, though of a lesser importance, thus indicating a hierarchical system in place. Yet other verse specifically mentions the name of Purus and other of Nahusha. There are many more examples of this kind in the Rigved, but even a few quoted above should suffice to convince the reader that according to the description given in the Rigved, the Sarasvati basin was bustling with activities, with peoples inhabiting it and kings ruling over them. This picture, he says, would have straightaway established a correlation between the cultural remains unearthed in the Sarasvati basin and the textual description in the Rigved, but for the mindset that separated the civilization's dating and that of writing of Rigveda allegedly in 1200 BCE. He avers that the solution to this can be found if we can establish the dating of Rigved, since the entire mess, as quoted by him, has been created by discrepancies in dating. Underlining the vital role played by Sarasvati in the Rigved, in which it has been referred to as mighty river originating in the Himalayas and flowing all the way down to the ocean, he notes that by time of Panchuramsa Brahmana, it had dried up. After bringing out these facts from literature, he goes on to discuss what archaeology and other sciences have to say on this matter. His first question was, how did it dry up? Citing the fieldwork carried out by two eminent geologists, Puri and Verma, he says that it is known that the Sarasvati originated from Himalayan glaciers and moving southwestwards, cut across the Shivaliks to descend on the plains. In the course of further fieldwork, these scholars found out that because of the tectonic movements, there came up a Bata-Markanda divide, which is nearly 30 meters in height. It blocked a part of Sarasvati, which could no longer flow southwestwards. It had perforce to reverse direction, and finding the Yamuna tier opening up to the southeast, took a new course and joined the Yamuna. Thus ended the glorious story of Sarasvati. I personally cannot but wonder how this fact has been subsumed in our narratives. And when the Pandas at Sangam talk about the Gupt Saraswati, how did it come about? Next question was, when did it dry up? In his excavations at Kalibangan, lasting 9 years on the bank of River Ghaggar, the Sarasvati of ancient times, he wanted to ascertain the time of abandonment of Kalibangan. It was here that he took to hydrological evidence to find the when of drying up. A team of Indian and Italian hydrologists, led by Robert Raikes, bored several holes in the dry bed of Sarasvati. And a paper published in Antiquity, titled Kalibangan, Death by Natural Causes, the team concluded that the death of Kalibangan was due to drying up of Sarasvati River around 2000 BCE. Putting this in perspective with what the Rigvedic says about Sarasvati being a mighty flowing river, he averred that it can safely be assumed that the river would have well been thriving around 2500 BC, that is the mid-3rd millennium BC. It was therefore evident that the Rigveda also had to be dated around the 3rd millennium BC. The river Sarasvati being an integral part of the Rigveda. Professor Lal takes up the literary evidence as given in Rigveda, Mandal 10, 75, Sut and verse 5 and 6. Translated, these verses speak the spread of Rigvedic people from River Ghaggar in the east to Sindhu in the west. Notice the sequence, as if somebody is reading it geographically. Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shatudri, Parushni, Askini, and Vitasta. And then the Indus. That is the spread of Rigveda. Now, civilization was in mid-3rd millennium BC. Harappan civilization also from same pattern, following from east, Ganga, Yamuna, Dwab, right through these rivers onto the Indus Valley civilization. To the Indus River, sorry. So just to quote him, now he says, a forthright question may be asked. Archaeologically, which culture occupied this very area in the 3rd, 4th millennium BC? That is, during the time of Rigveda. The inescapable answer will have to be Harappan, also called the Indus-Sarasvati civilization. In other words, the Vedas and the Harappan civilization are but the two faces of the same coin. The Vedic people were indigenous, they were neither invaders nor immigrants. And then he makes out a map in which the red line indicates the spread of Rigvedic people and the dotted line that of a Harappan civilization. He says, how long shall we continue to blindfold ourselves? Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.